How many of you are morning people? Yeah, I hate you all. Creative is for the nighttime, and the morning is for recovery from the creative night. That's my, yeah, all right. So I'm going to talk to you about creative thinking. The first thing I'm going to talk to you about is a story. In 1993, I was a student in college. I was a computer science student, but I was interested in design, and I had the good fortune to work my way into a senior design studio project class, semester-long project class. I worked on stuff for the whole semester, and I worked in a project team as the computer science guy, but contributing to the design project. And in the design studio, I'd never been in one before. I'd hang out there because my project team would meet there. And one day, I was hanging out there just working on my own stuff, and I saw a guy sitting at a big table, big desk, shared space kind of thing, with this huge sheet of paper, like this big, and he's sitting there with a pen, and he's making boxes, and he's doing little sketches. Box, little sketch. Box, little sketch. And sometimes he's moving quickly. Sometimes he's stopping and he's thinking. And I'm just doing my own thing, but eventually I'm just intrigued by what is this guy doing? He's just making boxes and filling them in. And this is like senior design studio. Like, doesn't seem very senior to me at all, what he's doing. So eventually I go up and I walk over to him and I say, hey, like, what are you doing? And I notice when I walk over to him that these thumbnail sketches he's drawing are actually of the same thing. Just different ideas for the same thing. And it was a design for a Walkman. That shows you how old I am. This was the active project in the class. I'm sure the second project would have been designing a scroll for somebody. But anyway, he was designing Walkmans, where to put the buttons, where to put the headphones, and all this stuff. And so I asked him, just, what are you doing? And he looked at me, and he wasn't annoyed that I asked him the question, but he seemed sort of confused as to why there'd be a question at all. And what he said was, I'm designing. And he didn't say anything else, and I didn't know the guy, so I was like, okay, and I walked off. I didn't think about it again. Then I went on to my own career. I've worked as an interaction designer. I've worked as a project manager. I've worked on lots and lots of things, lots and lots of creative projects where the whole goal is to come up with ideas for stuff and then build it and then ship it and then learn and do that again. And every so often I'd come back to that memory about that guy. I've always been interested in creative thinking and understanding how it works and how it's done and reading about from an artistic perspective, how do musicians and painters come up with ideas and develop them, how do engineers do it, how do scientists do it. And periodically, when I read all these books and this literature about creative thinking, I think about that guy. And I think about that guy because his answer was the right one. Where's my screen? It's not behind me. It's over there. The answer is that talking about creative thinking and all of these, patterns of thought and approaches, we get hung up on all this meta stuff. When at the end of the day, the word design is a verb. It's something you do. The word create is also a verb. It's something you do. It's an activity. When he told me he was designing, he was right. He was sitting there and working and thinking and actually coming up with ideas for stuff, and that's just all that it is. He didn't complain about how he had Walkman block and he couldn't come up with another design for a Walkman. He was just sitting there and working. And I think that's probably the best possible advice that you can start from, is creativity is a kind of work. It's a kind of effort. You burn calories when you are acting creatively. It's not something that happens passively to you. It's not about a moment or a flash of insight. That's really not what creativity is. It's a kind of work. And if you think about it as a kind of work, then all the other problems that people deal with, all the other situations people get into become much simpler to manage. When you're stuck on something, that's why creativity is hard. It's supposed to be hard. If it was easy, everyone would be writing novels and making movies and making plays and designing amazing things because it'd be easy. So when you're stuck, remember, now you're actually being a creator. You're facing a challenge. You don't know what to do. Now you're actually in a moment where you have the opportunity to actually be a professional, creative person. So I'm going to talk to you for probably 18 more minutes. The first 8 minutes are going to be more theory-ish kind of stuff. And then the last 10 minutes will be hacks, little tricks and techniques. And then we'll have open Q&A, and you guys can ask me about specific tricks that you've heard about and you want to know, based on all the stuff that I've read and all the research I've done, if there's merit to them, or particular creative problems that you face, you want to hear my opinion of them. Or if you think I'm a moron and I'm not worth your time, don't ask any questions, and you all get to go off and have your day even sooner. Okay? So, the first philosophical thing to know is this phrase, that ideas are made of other ideas. All ideas are simply the combination of other ideas. So I want everyone to say it. All ideas are made of other ideas.
All ideas are made
Wow.
of other ideas.
You guys are clearly morning people, or you're well caffeinated, because you guys are very loud. All ideas are made of other ideas. So that means that if you don't know what to do, you're stuck on which Walkman design, you've done 7 of them, you're on number 8, what to do, take 2 ideas for 2 other things and combine them together and see what happens. It might not be good, it might not be interesting, but it'll be a new idea, be a new formulation. Whenever you're stuck, it means you're no longer seeing things in components. So break them down into pieces. Now this little theory, it's nothing revelatory about this, but we forget it because usually when we hear about some new idea, it's presented to us as a concrete, solid thing. And usually there's some mythology about the person who came up with that idea, that somehow they had a flash of insight, and it came to them in a moment, a flash of brilliance. No one had ever had that idea before, which is complete bullshit. But we hear those stories, we like those stories that romanticizes the idea of creativity. But you can find lots and lots of examples. In fact, I believe all examples of ideas are derivable. So E equals mc squared, theory of relativity. Einstein did not invent any of the main components of this theory. He didn't invent the idea of energy. He did not invent the equal sign, did not invent the notion of the speed of light, did not invent squaring numbers. He didn't invent any of those things. What's the significance of his work? He found a way to combine those things in a new way that had significant meaning. But his idea was based on other ideas. This is a diagram of a very famous algorithm. Does anyone know what it is? 5, 4. You get a free book. 3, 2. You get 2 books. 1. This is a diagram for the PageRank algorithm, Google's PageRank algorithm. Billions. You guys are disappointed now. Somebody did say it, but they didn't raise their hand. Sorry. No post facto credit. The whole idea was based on academic papers. If you ever read academic papers at the bottom, they reference all the papers the person who wrote that paper read. That was their inspiration for PageRank. They took an idea from another medium, academic papers, and saw an opportunity to take that idea and transpose it onto a new medium, the web. They took an old idea, reused it, and now they are very wealthy. Music is a similar story. My generation was sort of on the cusp of hip-hop and remixing music and sampling and all that stuff, and it's seen as this crime against the creators, the original creators of work, to sample stuff and reuse it. But the history of music is about reusing stuff. This guy is Mozart. Mozart ripped off stuff from Bach. It's true. Mozart did not invent chord progressions. He did not invent the piano. He did not invent the black keys or the white keys. He did not invent the guitar. He did not invent thousands of things that he used and eventually recycled or regenerated or combined in a new and unique way to create things that were beautiful and amazing. But if you talk to him, he would say, an interesting side note about genius and the notion of prodigy is you ask any of these people, who did you learn from? Who are your inspirations? They can always cite people who's not in the case of Mozart, but in the case of modern musicians, albums that they listen to again and again and again. And part of what was going on there is they were internalizing some of those ideas, and then when it came time to create for themselves, they had this inventory of ideas to combine and reuse. So if ever you're stuck, the thing you want to start with is figuring out how to combine ideas in a different way. It's about combination. So that's part 1 of my sequence on theory. Part 2 is inhibition. There's this very stupid puzzle. Who has seen this puzzle before? Okay, not that many of you. Okay, I'm going to inflict some stupidity on you for the next 3 minutes for those of you who have not seen this. So there's a phrase I'm sure all of you have heard, which is think outside the box. Who here's heard that phrase? Who here's uttered that phrase? Oh, you have to. Come on. So it's a stupid phrase. I don't like it. It comes from this puzzle. And usually people use that as like a stupid cliche way to get you to be creative. It's sort of like saying to someone, don't be stupid. Like, think outside the box. Like, somehow that's going to provoke you now into being smart. Oh, I thought we were supposed to be inside the box today. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was Wednesday, which is out of the box day. Anyway, that phrase comes from this puzzle. And the puzzle is usually presented to you on a piece of paper, and you're given a pen. And the goal is, that the challenge is, with a pen, you're able to put the pen down once, and you can only draw straight lines, 4 straight lines. How can you draw 4 straight lines such that, without raising your pen, such that it touches every dot? That's the puzzle. Will you think about it for 5 seconds? Mull over in your head what you might do.
Drop it down.
Everyone work by themselves. It's not a team project yet. Team projects are later. So the solution, which I will show you now, is basically the only way you can possibly do it is you have to draw at least one line that is outside of the box. And the intended lesson here is that there's false constraints in all problems. We assume, no, I didn't tell you you had to only stay within the lines. I didn't tell you 1,000 different things. But we assume them, and then we constrain our ideas based on these made-up assumptions. And creative people, as the theory goes, creative people are less inhibited about those constraints. Or they're better at identifying assumptions and saying, do we have to do this? Do we have to do that? Can we rip this out? Can we not follow that? And by that alone, by ripping those constraints out, they then find ideas other people won't find. So in this case, this is the classic solution to the puzzle. But it turns out there's other solutions to the puzzle that are even more creative. It's possible to do it in 3 lines. If you go further outside the box, then it's also possible to do it in 1 line. If you make a really fat line. I didn't say what size the line was. A line is just the distance between 2 points filled with something, right? So the whole theory here, this is based on fairly old psychological theory. That we have all this stuff going on in our minds. Freud was a big proponent about this, the collision between our subconscious and our conscious minds, and the will that we have to want to follow rules and constraints and fit in, but then the subconscious that we have that's always tearing against those rules and pushing against them. And people who we would call creatives or who are better at being creative, they have a better connection between those two things. Somehow they're able to connect their subconscious and conscious together in a way that generates more ideas or better ideas. But the simple lesson here, though, is that as you remove constraints, as you remove assumptions, even if you're not any smarter, even if you're not any more interesting as a person, if you're able to identify those constraints and remove them, you will see ideas and ways to solve problems other people won't. That's it. There are exercises you can do to help you find the constraints. Some of it's very logical, project managey kind of techniques, so a lot of creative types never learn them. But you can sit down and make, what are we assuming about this design problem? Make a list of them, and then go through them a second time, and go, can we get rid of this one? Can we get rid of that one? Get rid of that one? If you find 1 or 2 constraints that everyone else is assuming are true that are not, that's your gold mine. Now you have a whole direction to go that you wouldn't have seen before. The third thing, theory-wise, has to do with environment. And one of the stupid, annoying things about most books and lectures about creative thinking, that we try to model our behavior on other creatives. It's sort of like saying, I want to be different just like that guy. I want to be different, but just like everybody else. And it doesn't work. Everyone is different and unique, and part of what makes you creative is that you see problems differently. You have a different background, a different heritage, a different set of experiences. And when you bring that to bear on a problem, it's your uniqueness that makes things interesting. What this means is that you have to pay attention to which environments or what situations you seem to be the most creative in. It's not necessarily going to be what you want. It's not necessarily going to be, like, I'm not a morning person. It turns out that I might want to be a morning person. There might be advantages to working more creatively in the morning. I can't. I know from my own habits and behavior, I tend to be more creative at night. Therefore, if I want to do creative work, I have to work at night. End of story. For some people, environment, well, for everybody, you have to start paying attention to the environments that you end up being more productive creatively in. It could be a cube. I'm sure there are some people in the world that this is their preferred place to be. It's not mine. It's probably not yours, but it could be. It could be that it's solitude, that you work best when you're off alone somewhere in the quiet, maybe in nature, maybe sitting in a coffee shop where you don't know anyone, where there's some passive white noise activity going on. It could be that. It could be that it's when you're around other people, that you really get your juices flowing and your mind gets active. When there's someone else that you're working with on a problem together, you can bounce stuff back and forth. That dynamic is how you get empowered, and what drives you to do the work of creativity could be that. But there's no one answer to this. The only answer is yours. And one of the things I'm going to talk about in the hacks section are how to figure some of that stuff out. But you have to start by paying attention to your own habits and your own peaks of creative activity. Related to this, too, is this doesn't get talked about much in like art school or design school or writing programs, but there's a lot of support for the notion that our minds are wired around physical activity. And it's called kinesthetics. That's the fancy name for it. But it basically means if you know anyone who likes to go for walks when they're having some problem they're trying to solve. They want to go for a walk, or they want to walk down the hall, or even people who pace when there's something they're working on. That's kinesthetics. That somehow their mind is more comfortable in doing certain kinds of thinking if their body is moving. And the neuroscience background for this is very simple. If you imagine what we were like 5 million years ago or 20 million years ago, little frog-like reptilian creatures who really had a hard time surviving, all of our brain power was spent paying attention to our physical environment and figuring out how to be agile and how to run away from predators and how to collect food or break into things. And so our minds, the oldest parts of our brains, are wired around physical activity and touching things and feeling things. So when you touch and feel things, you're activating parts of your brain that are very old and very powerful, and engaging that can help you connect and make your mind work in a more natural way. Everyone's different. Einstein was one of these people who liked to walk. There's quite a few physicists, actually, who had this habit. Niels Bohr was another one, that if you wanted to meet with him to talk about some kind of physics project, he'd say, let's go. He'd be like, what? He's like, we're going for a walk. I thought we were working. We are working. We're going for a walk. That was the conversation that would ensue. Then there's more specific examples of this. Jackson Pollock, he's famous for these elaborate abstract paintings. But he became part of the work. He actually felt most comfortable standing on top of the paintings. That was how he felt he was part of the work, and his body and all of his energy could be connected to the stuff that he was making. So environment. Persistence. This is my last bit of theory. So we're going to switch over to hacks in about 2 minutes. So if you're bored with the theory stuff, you're almost ready for hacks. Persistence. Most of the attention around ideas and how ideas work is focused on idea generation. And idea generation is not really the hard part. It can be for some people. It can be if you're in a bureaucratic company or a large group. It can be a problem then. But once you have an idea, there's this long road you have to go through to bring that idea to fruition. Whether that's designing a mousetrap or building a website or writing a book or a novel or a play. The idea for it is important, but there's always going to be this long succession of work that involves micro and medium-sized level of creativity in order to bring the thing all the way through. So there's this famous quote that everyone knows is Thomas Edison, who's one of these prototypical creative thinker guys. Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% preparation, or perspiration? Perspiration, preparation. P's, 90% P. It's all about the P's. Famous quote. And there's some truth to this. I don't think those numbers are quite right, but there's some truth to this. But at the same time, though, you don't want to, and I believe this is true, persistence is important, but at the same time, there's a counterpoint to this, which is beating your head against the wall again and again and again, assuming that persistence will create an idea for you or create inspiration isn't always true either. So how many of you guys know who Tesla is? Tesla? Most of you. Awesome. Very cool. Is that from the movie The Prestige that you guys know him? What's the story? Anybody know? What did Tesla invent? Oh, you guys have been outed as not knowing anything about Tesla. Anybody? Direct current.
The radio.
So he invented radio. So anytime you use Wi-Fi, you should thank Mr. Tesla. But anyway, Tesla and Edison worked together. They had very different views on the creative process. So this is the kind of stuff that Edison would say. Tesla said this: if Edison had a needle to find in a haystack, he would proceed at once to examine straw after straw until he found the object of his search. I was a sorry witness of such doings, knowing that a little theory and calculation would have saved him 90% of his labor. Which is true. Tesla was actually probably a much better inventor than Edison. Crappy businessman, lousy marketer, probably a better inventor. I show both of these stories because persistence is important, but there's no reason why you have to pick between working hard or working smart. If you're going to do anything creative, you're going to do a project, you're going to deliver to fruition so other people can see what you made, it's going to require both of these things. So the 1%, 99% thing probably isn't right, but the other polarity probably isn't right either. So I'm going to take a sip of water now, and then we're going to talk about hacks for 10 minutes. Okay. Now, hacks. There are lots of these things. Depending on your questions, I could probably offer a lot more. I've spent a lot of time researching how different creatives in different fields, how they deal with these different problems. I used to teach a class at the University of Washington on creative thinking, and some of these hacks came out of that too. just by spending a semester talking about ways to develop ideas and seeing where people got stuck, some of these hacks came out of just that experience. So hack number 1, this is the most important one, is keeping some kind of journal. All of us, given how our brains work and how neurons function, the fact that we survive and you exist means that there are ideas going through your brain all the time. All the time. Conscious, unconscious, semi-conscious, drunk, sober. Ideas are going through your brain all the time. Some of those ideas are good. A lot of them are bad, but some of them are good. The primary problem most of us have, is that we depend on our memories for remembering our ideas. Our memories are awful. You know the movie Memento? That's us. Like, think about it. You all have notes and like lists of things you want to do, and you put them all over the place. You keep believing the system's working, but really it's not. That's us. And so the first step as a creative person, you're thinking about how to be more productive with your ideas or capture more of them, you have to record them somewhere. So this was the first assignment people in this class got. Everyone had to keep an idea journal, and that meant that anytime they had an idea about anything, something they wanted to make for dinner, an idea for a movie, something about the project they were working on, something about, it could be anything, it doesn't matter, write it down. Write it down. Write down your ideas. Capture them somewhere. And then a day goes by, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by. Now you have an inventory of all the stuff that's been going through your brain that has been recorded through the wonderful technology of writing. Now your ideas persist. A lot of them are going to be awful. They're not even going to make sense to you, especially if you write in your journal when you're drunk, which is something that I do. I'm like, oh, I don't know that guy. That guy's kind of scary. But the ideas, I'm thinking now how many of you have been drunk with me? Anyway, it's now captured for you, and you can look back on it whenever you like. And you'll find stuff that's really good and really meaty that you can then pull out and go, I'm going to work on this now. There has to be some way that you hold on to and persist your ideas. How many of you currently keep some kind of idea journal? How many? So keep your hands up. Wow, okay. More hands went up. It's bizarre. Of those of you who keep your hands up, if your journal is digital, drop your hand. Fascinating. Okay, so just so we're going to report back to you, most people, you can drop your hands now, sorry. At the end of the talk, your hands would still be up. I feel awful. Most of you who raise your hand with keeping a journal, it's physical. I mentioned before about kinesthetics. There's definitely something, our fingers have one of the most dense areas of nerve endings in our body. That means our brains are activated by when we use our fingers. When you're writing, you are using your hands and fingers. The way your brain is processing whatever you're doing or writing is going to be different. It doesn't guarantee, again, everyone is different. It doesn't guarantee you're going to have better ideas when you write with your hands instead of typing on a computer, but you probably will. It's at least worth an experiment to try. And I'll actually talk more about switching modes later. Anyway, this is a stack of all the journals that people in the class had. And the assignment really was, no one's going to look at it. The only thing I would do is flip through the book at the end of the semester to see if you had at least 20 pages, which was about the equivalent of 2 pages a week for the class. That's all that I cared about, volume. And part of the idea here is also about inhibition. That unlike your work projects or things you work on with other people, your journal is just for you. There's no reason to be afraid to put stuff in it. If you're afraid of your own ideas, then your problem is not about creativity. Your problem is you need therapy of some kind. Because if you're afraid of what's going on in your mind, this is what's going on in your mind all the time. You just now see it. It's just now written down. That's a different kind of problem. You have to wonder, why are you so inhibited about these are just ideas? If you're a creative person, that's something you have to learn to let loose. Have some safe place to let it loose. You might not want to show that to your kids or your spouse or your friends or your parents, but it's yours. Private and secure, you can lock it if you want, put it under your bed, whatever you want to do. That's yours. And that keeps your mentality fresh now that you're open to your own ideas. Hack number 2 is about escaping. How many of you have gotten a good idea in the shower? How many of you shower? Bathing of some kind. Good. It's important for professional longevity, bathing. The reason why we get ideas in the shower, there's a couple of reasons. One is one of the few places we have that's you get actual solitude. There's nothing coming at you. There's no inputs. There's just relaxing water. No one's talking to you. There's nothing to look at. You close your eyes, and you're actually calm. Most of our days now are not very calm. We're interrupted by everything. We consume all these different kinds of media. Lots of stuff is thrown at us all the time. Sometimes we're listening to television while we're on the web. We're doing all this stuff that's coming in. When there's that much input, it's a lot harder for your brain to give you output. It's just that simple. The more theoretical way to think about what goes on in the shower, it's a book called Flow by the guy's name I can't pronounce, Csikszentmihalyi. I practiced it 5 times, but I've forgotten it now. Does anyone know how to pronounce his name? Thank you. You get a book, whoever said that. Yeah, after the talk. Anyway, his whole theory about all this stuff, based on studying people, he gave people pagers, and we paged them and find out what their state was. And he did all this research to figure out when people were in flow, which we would call, being in the zone or being very creative. And he identified that our brains process ideas and process problems in 3 stages, roughly in 3 stages. The first stage is understanding. You're learning about the problem, trying to figure out how it works. You've gotten all the inputs that you can about the problem. You've come up with a couple of ideas, but then you're kind of stuck. Now, the second stage is incubation. I mentioned before about inhibition and that our subconscious and conscious minds have to work as a pair. Most of the good stuff comes from your subconscious mind. That's where all of these adjacent pairs are found, all these weird connections are made between things. It's your subconscious mind. So your subconscious mind has to process this stuff for a while before it can give you a good idea. So you need time when you're not actually working on the problem. That's why you may work on something and you're stuck, and then 3 days later you'll come up with the solution. You're like, where'd that come from? Where it came from was your subconscious brain. It wasn't the muse. It wasn't some angel on your shoulder. It wasn't some mystical thing. That was your subconscious brain processing the stuff. And how this links back to the shower stuff, when you're in the shower, your subconscious mind tends to be kind of quiet. It's sort of like the smart but quiet friend that you have, who if you're in a busy conversation won't say very much. But if everyone gets quiet for a minute, they'll say the most brilliant thing. That's what your subconscious mind is like. Whereas your conscious mind is like your pushy friend that always drives the conversation, tells everyone what to do all the time. That's your conscious mind. That's what you're doing all day. I'm going to go here, I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. So when you're in the shower, it's one of the few opportunities that your subconscious mind gets a chance to speak. There are other ways to get your subconscious mind to speak. For some people, it's doing things like improv games. You do improv theater, where you're working and you're making decisions fast enough that your conscious mind can't keep up, and you're just doing stuff that's raw and open. For some people, it's intoxicants. Alcohol lowers your inhibition. Your subconscious mind now has an easier chance to get its stuff surfaced. But that's the shower story. So think about other opportunities for your subconscious mind to surface. Meditation. For some people, it's athletics. When you go for a run, your body's active kinesthetic-wise. It's going along. Your mind is free. And boom, now you have your idea. So think about ways to allow your subconscious mind to get a chance to participate. Hack number 3. And there's only 3 more. Hack number 3. This is particularly good when you're working with other people. When you're working with other people, there's often politics in the room about who's going to say what. Brainstorming is challenging most because of politics. I'm afraid of what they're going to think if I say this idea. My boss is here and I want a promotion, so I don't want to say anything that's going to embarrass me because then I'm not going to get promoted. It's all this politics about other people. And it takes a while before people are open enough to actually say what they're thinking. So there's this trick called inversion. It goes by other names. But the inversion trick is basically this, that when you have a specific problem you're trying to solve, let's just say, for example, that you're working on coming up with a new design for a mobile phone. Come with a fantastic user experience for a mobile phone. The task here to invert it would be, let's design the worst possible user experience for a mobile phone. So what would be some of the features in the worst possible experience for a mobile phone? Worst possible.
It's really big.
Really big.
It has a cord.
Has a cord. Weighs 50 pounds. Rotary. Has spikes coming out.
It randomly calls people.
Randomly calls people you don't like.
Yeah.
In the back. Anyone in the back?
Doesn't work outside.
What do you got? Drop calls. It drops every call. Extremely slow. AC adapter. You got one?
It's on the other side of the hearing piece.
Oh, nice. You got to go back and forth. Nice. Yeah. How about gives you rabies? Why not, right? Empties your bank account every 3rd call. So look, we've never met before, right? I've never met any of you before, I don't think. Not many of you. Like, why is that so easy and fun? Everyone's laughing in 10 seconds. Why? Freedom. Why is it free?
No wrong answer.
Because what? No wrong answers. So the fact that the goal is to be bad is liberating in a way that the goal of making a great idea is almost never. And once you have this vibe in a room with a couple of other people, where people are laughing and they get each other's sense of humor, people are being daring and seeing how far they can go and building on each other, that's exactly the vibe you want when you flip it around and now go, okay, now let's flip it around and talk about the best design. You've established the kind of dynamic you want by playing this little stupid game, which is actually going to be very entertaining for like 5 minutes maybe. And you flip it around. You've created the vibe now that most facilitators and group managers of brainstorming sessions try for hours to generate and never do because it's way too serious. So invert. When you invert the goal, it gets silly and fun. Everyone feels liberated and open. You get sense of humor in the room. And now you get the right tone. Switch it back over. Sometimes, actually, if you keep a list of all the really crazy bad ideas, and when you're done, you switch over, you can look at those things and go, if we inverted this, maybe there's a good idea there. Maybe instead of giving you rabies, it gives you vaccines. There's actually, I know you're laughing, but there's actually, I heard on the radio they were talking about building Geiger counters into cell phones. So there's a way you can, like there's other things you can add to cell phones that give it. Anyway, I'm just saying, it's not that ridiculous if you're actually brainstorming to go take these messed up, weird ideas that are really sick and twisted, and then try to flip them over. Maybe something good comes out of that. Number 4 is partnering. This is kind of a cheesy one. It's sort of obvious, but people forget this, that many of the great legendary inventors and creators in every field, despite how much credit they got for being a prodigy and solo artist, solo creator, they had partners. They at least had teachers. Every prodigy in the world had dozens of teachers that taught them a lot of what they knew. So if you feel like you're not creative enough, you want to boost your creativity, find a partner to work with on a project. If you can't find a partner, find a rival. You don't need to know the rival. Just pick someone who you want to compete with. I'm not saying like that's the end goal of creativity is to show someone up and rub their face in it, you know. I made this painting, it's better than yours. That's not what I'm saying. But there are many, many examples of creators who had rivalries that they used to fuel their work. Da Vinci and Michelangelo really hated each other. They did not like each other. Part of the reason why Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, he was not a painter, he hated painting, was because Da Vinci was held up to be the best artist in Italy, and he was a painter. So Michelangelo's like, yeah, he's a painter, I'll show you how to paint. Sistine Chapel. I'm not saying this is the healthiest attitude to have in life. We're not talking about health here. We're talking about creativity. Okay? Different morning lecture series, right? Number 5 is failure. There's this weird dynamic for many creative people, between the dreams and ideas that we always have, like things we strive for, things we wish for, things we want to create in the world, and this extreme sensitivity to rejection. Like it's this very polarized and dangerous, I don't know how to diagram it, dangerous set of things, because the bigger the idea is, the more rejection you're going to need to face to get that idea to go anywhere. So part of the practice of being a creative person and developing ideas is just saying, you know what, today I'm going to do something and fail. I'm just going to fail. I'm going to find a challenge or a problem that is so hard that I fail. And if I can't remember the last time I have failed at something, even if it's just a sketch or a diagram or whatever the low fidelity early thing is in your field, the last time you did one of those, it just didn't work at all. If you can't remember that, then you're being a chicken. You're not pushing yourself. The whole idea of the creative process is about failure. It's about recognizing, I'm going to sketch, and I'm going to learn. I'm going to do another sketch, do another sketch, do another sketch. And through the process, the sketches are going to get better towards solving this problem and this idea. So find a way to fail. And if you're looking for partners, find partners who also understand this notion of failure. Until you actually ship the thing, until you put the painting up on the wall, until you put the movie in the theater or the book in the store, you're not done yet. So it's not really a failure. You're failing all along the way when you're creating, because everything you do is never complete until you reach the final page or you reach the final version of the thing. So find ways to fail. There's this long history of this confused perception of great artists, that they never failed. They did everything perfectly. But if you read the journals and the actual evidence, the daily evidence of how they worked, they failed all the time. Some of them were better at dealing with it than others, and some of them had better language about it than others. So there's one quote I want to read you from a famous architect, Christopher Alexander. Who's heard of Christopher Alexander? Wow, he's old now, I guess, which makes me old. Okay, I'll read the quote anyway. Architects are good visualizers, but most of the time we're wrong. Even when you're doing good, you're making 9 mistakes for every success. The more at each stage you can experience to contemplate a reality, the more it will give you feedback, and you'll be able to intelligently develop it. Creative process. Christopher Alexander was a little bit of like, not a blowhard, but a wordy kind of guy. Hemingway said this: first draft of everything is shit. Full stop. Hemingway, like 4 words. First draft is always going to suck. That's part of the deal in making stuff. Everyone's first draft sucks. A lot of artists don't want to admit this. Michelangelo didn't want to admit this. He burned all of his sketches. He didn't want the world to know about his sketches. He wanted the world to perceive this just one day he went into the studio and just carved a thing just from his mind. Bullshit, not how it worked. He sketched and practiced and studied, and he'd sit and look at the sculpture before he would start or when he was stuck, and he'd sit and stare at it and study it. You could argue in those days he was failing. You could also argue in those days he was learning because he was failing. He didn't know enough about how to take the next step, so he was paused, but he did not stop. Like the guy I saw in the design studio, he was still making diagrams. He was still thinking, what else can I do? What else can I do? Long history of famous things that when they were first made, everyone thought was stupid and retarded. The Eiffel Tower, they wanted to tear it down before it was completed. Completely unpopular construction. Now it's the most famous thing in Paris, one of the most famous objects in the world. Van Gogh, everyone told him, all the art critics, all the artists he knew, used too much paint. You're using too much paint. That's what they told Van Gogh. Too much paint. It's nice and everything, but it's kind of fuzzy. I mean, that's the feedback you got. First stuff, there's no way around it. All the great things in the world that we look now as like relics that are perfect when they were created were rejected. People did not see them yet. Last hack for you is switching modes. So I've mentioned a few different ways to think about thinking. That kinesthetic, maybe moving around, maybe it's your environment. Ideas can be represented in many different ways. You can represent an idea through words. You can represent an idea through pictures, through sketches, through drawings, through diagrams, through wireframes. You can express an idea through sound. Some ideas are easy to express in different mediums. So if you're stuck in one medium, pick a different one. There's lots of really interesting examples of this in how we teach children things. So this is the famous diagram that everyone's been taught about, how electrons work, right? This is not actually what electrons look like. This is not an actual photo. But this way to represent an idea has a lot of power. It's more powerful and conveys a lot more information than what the actual thing looks like. That's one way to switch modes. I read a lot about stories of invention and how they did it. Double helix, that's what this is the diagram of. The guys who were trying to figure out, the guys and women who were trying to figure out DNA and how it worked, they were doing all the experiments, they weren't working quite right. They needed a model to express their vision for how they thought it worked. And this was the model that helped them actually break through and figure out how it worked. These were not artists, these were not sketchers or designers. There was a visual representation. They tried a few other ones, but this is the one that allowed them to do the right experiments that proved or that demonstrated how DNA actually functioned. So representation, if you're stuck, find a different way to represent the problem. Sometimes just going to another person who even may know nothing about the problem and trying to explain it to them will force you to represent the problem differently in your own mind. Trigger, I got it now. This happens to me all the time. I go to someone asking for advice. I hate asking for advice. I'm like, got this problem, and I start whiteboarding it. Halfway through, before they know what the hell I'm talking about, I'm like, I got it. Because the process of explaining it changes how I think about the problem. So try it out. You have to apologize then, because people feel like you wasted their time. But actually, they help perfectly, just not in the way that they expected to help me. So that's my last one. This is just a pretty picture of a double helixy kind of thing. So my last thing for you is creativity is a kind of work. That's the foundation. If you stop romanticizing and mythologizing about ideas, all the things that you want out of your creative life and your work are much easier to obtain. These are my references, and I'm happy to take questions now. All right, no questions. Thanks, Scott. In the back. Hang on.
So I really appreciated talking about several of the establishing how to figure out where you're at your peak creatively. How do you communicate that in a, like, you're looking for a job? I need to move around while I'm talking, or I work best at night and your hours are 9 to 5. What are the recommendations for trying to establish yourself and work with other people who don't have those similar
Okay, so the question was, what do you do if you know how you like to work? You like to work, I don't know, like to work at night, and it's a 9 to 5 job. What do you do? I think you're probably a mismatch. Just if you're in a place that's that restrictive about how you work. The best possible environments are about results. You're hired to achieve a result. And the more creative the environment, the more likely it's going to be oriented that way. I don't think I would bring it up in a job interview. I think I'd bring it up when I had a job offer. When I have a job offer, they've expressed based on what we know about you, we think you're a good fit for the job. And they don't say, I think I'm a good fit for the job too, but the way I work best is X. Let's negotiate how we can accommodate X. Does not need to come up until then. Bringing it up until then is just making your bargaining power or your appeal as a candidate lower. It's a lot of stuff you don't say during a job interview, right? I think that would be one of them. I wouldn't even bring it up. I would pay attention to the other people in the work environment and what they're like, and how flexible does the work environment seem. I have a book for you for asking a question. Do you want the orangey one or the white one? What? The orangey one. Okay. You have to come up here and get it, though, because I'm not coming over there. Other questions? In the green. I should repeat the question, right? Do I ever worry about running out of ideas? No. Do I ever worry about running out of good ideas? Maybe. But the thing is, though, that's part of why the journal is useful, that you never know where an idea is going to fit. You really never know. But until you write down, until it's captured somewhere, you never... That happens to me. So I'm primarily a writer. It's probably my primary creative medium is writing. I write stuff down all the time. When I talk to you, I write stuff down. I'm listening to the radio, I write stuff down. And it'll happen every so often. Not all the time. Every so often, I'm like, oh, like I'm writing this essay now, and there's that thing. It was about a month ago, and now this thing that I didn't know what to do with, now I have a place for it. It's now possible. Is it likely? No. But is it possible? Yes. I think if you're paying attention and you're capturing what is in your brain, you will never run out of ideas. But a good idea is a different thing. Yes?
Do you keep different journals, like specific to different things, or just one stream of conscious journal?
I am a compulsive journaler. I am not very protective of them. I don't really, for me, it's the process. If I lose one of these journals, I didn't remember what was in it anyway. But the fact that I am writing stuff down, that means I am always paying attention to what's going through my brain. I don't throw them away. But if I lost one, I'm like, okay, well, that means I have to just keep going.
But I mean, do you have specific ones for specific things?
Nope. And maybe I should have a better system, but I think I would ruin it if I had a system.
Will you just repeat the questions?
Yes. Yes.
Can you make a business case for creativity in the workplace?
Yes.
How do you go about doing that?
Case?
I would love to do that at my workplace because our business is starting to fail in some ways.
Right.
And the employees aren't allowed to be really creative. It's butts in the seat 8 hours a day.
Okay, so how do you bring creativity into the workplace?
Yes.
First thing, don't call it creativity. Don't call it creativity. You don't need like labels. We like labels. We like to be the champion with the flag. Creatives, we're bringing design into the world. Like, oh, look at the flag. You have flags when you're fighting a war. And you don't want to fight a war when you're outnumbered. You don't. If you're outnumbered, you don't do that. You want to, right? You want to have camouflage on. You want to pay it. This doesn't mean to be like subversive subversive maybe, but you don't have to be Machiavellian or evil about it. But in order to make change happen anywhere, it's about power. Who has enough power to make the kind of change happen that you want? What kind of changes happened at all ever? If you're in an environment that nothing has ever changed, then the likelihood of you coming in with some philosophy or attitude as an outsider who doesn't have a lot of power, making that happen is very low. If you look in the company, you can see evidence a year ago, 6 months ago, this boss in that group changed something. Okay, there's some hope. Change is possible in the culture. I'd go and pay attention. How did that person make change happen? How did they do it? Did they just one day show up and work and do it? No. They probably found out who are their allies in this kind of change. Who will support them if they show the flag? Like, who's going to be behind them? So I pay attention to other kinds of change in your work environment. If there's no change at all and status quo, it's like a bank from the 50s and it's all the same forever, then it's really, really, really unlikely, no matter how smart or creative you are, because the culture just doesn't know how to deal with that. But if you see it, but if you see examples of change, study those examples. How did they do it in the culture? Maybe they had a financial argument. They're going to save money if they do X. It's financial. It's about the money. It's a creative idea, but I wouldn't use that word. We want to save the company money. Here's how we're going to do it. That's your camouflage. And then you follow that and say whatever creative stuff you want. But it's about solving a problem that your boss has said is the most important thing. That's your ticket. Yes, you're very well dressed, so you should get to speak.
Sometimes when I'm feeling stagnant and I can't get new ideas, I'll sit and I'll read the graphic novels. It's like instead of watching TV, it's like something I do to take me away from everything and put me in a different mindset, total fantasy. Do you have something that you do that's similar? I guess, you mentioned like going for walks, maybe when you're trying to jog your memory. Do you have something that you resort to when you feel like you need just to reset your mind?
So the question was, what do I do when I need to reset my mind? Again, I encourage you, these are like other people's ways of solving problems. It's like wearing other people's clothes. Like, it's not really going to work out. It looks great on them, and you put it on, and it's not going to work. I have many. Exercise is definitely one. If I go for a run or I go play basketball, my body is so focused on something, my mind goes to a meditative place like the shower, and I find that when I'm stuck on a problem, exercise is usually valuable for me. Usually valuable. But other times, it's I need to go watch a movie, or I need to go out with friends and get drunk. There's a lot of stuff in life that anything that I find is fully engaging tends to take me out of whatever context I was in, and then when I come back to the thing I was working on, I see it very differently. There's another hack actually made me think of. The hack I learned from my wife, who's a painter. And her hack is this. If one way to deal with it, like you're stuck on a problem, is to work on two things at the same time. So you start on project A, you're working on A, you get stuck. You're like, okay, I don't want to work on A anymore, it's too hard. I'll work on B. You work on B. B seems easy because A was hard. Work on B. Easy, 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 hard, hard, hard. I'm stuck on B. I really don't want to work on B anymore. All of a sudden, A is going to look really attractive if you go back to A. A, I'm working on A. I got, a little bit further, but now I'm stuck again. B, okay. B, go back to B. You're working on both. You have an outlet from one project that's another project. It's a pretty slick little trick. The risk is you become a workaholic and you just have 7 projects. You don't talk to anyone anymore. But working on multiple projects for some people can be a way to deal with being stuck, because it allows you to be stuck and say, okay, I'm stuck, but I still have a way to be productive and not beat myself up for feeling like I'm stuck. So that's a trick that might work. Yeah?
Deadlines. So you have to work within deadlines, and you need creative solutions to get to the deadlines. At least for me, I find that, especially when I'm doing design work, because I develop and you have to switch gears, I tend to, because I don't design very often, go into like this inspiration mode where I'm like researching,
Mm-hmm.
but then that can like never end.
Okay.
But I was the pressure of deadlines.
So how to deal with creativity on a deadline? There's no magic answer. I think discipline is really the right answer. That if you have 2 weeks you have a deadline 2 weeks from now, and you need this phase, that's the research experimental phase, then I'm big on thirds. So let's say it's 3 weeks, okay? 3 weeks. So I know I need a chunk of time to just explore and experiment. That's my first week. I have a hard date. After that week, I'm done with experimenting. Then my second week is going to be prototyping. Maybe my goal is to have 3 different prototypes. So I'm still exploring, but in this very structured way. And the last week is to pick one direction out of the prototypes and just build it.
Break it down.
Yeah, break it down and discipline. There's no way around the discipline part. But being disciplined to go, I know I need that time. If I don't get that time, then if your schedule is just 3 days, you can do the same thing. Day 1 is experiment. Day 2 is 3 prototypes. Day 3 is actually build it. So it scales, but discipline is the answer. Yeah?
If you have too many ideas, do you have a process for refining or figuring out which one might be the best idea to work on?
So the question was, what do you do if you have too many ideas? How do you prioritize? So a lot of my career, I was the team manager guy. It's like a project manager guy. And the rule of what project managers do, this is really the core of what any good project manager does, is make stacked ranked lists. People show up, do this, 30 things. My job, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you have your list of 20 ideas, even if you don't, I've done this. In my journal, I'll say, okay, what am I going to write about next? And I'll go through and I'll see that. I'll have 10 of them, put them aside. And I'll look at them and I go, I have no idea what that one is. That one I don't know. That one sounds promising. That one's sort of promising. And I can take them and put them in some rough order based on my own intuition of their value. And that's a place to start from. It's also a kind of discipline thing. Yes, all of those ideas are good, but unless I find a way to rank them, it could even be a random ranking so I know what to start with first, then I will never get out of the exploration experimental phase. And the idea generation part is usually not the hardest part. So the sooner I can move into actually building something or solving a problem, the more informed I'll then be about maybe I decide this is actually the wrong idea. I'm going to go back to my list and now I have a better way to prioritize it. Put them in order. It could even be random, but have an order and then start working on the one that you put first. Done. Yes?
My friend is watching the streaming and she texted me a question.
Cool. That is so amazing.
Can you ask on persistence, how do you know when to stop?
How do you know when to stop? Right. There is no answer. It's sort of like, how do you know when to get married? Or how do you know when to break up with someone? How do you know when to break up with someone? The reason why there's no good answer is because there's no way to predict the outcomes of creative challenges. There's no way to know for certain that if you work on it for another year, it's going to come to fruition. There's no way to know that. So the more projects you work on, this is why creativity is a kind of work. The more you work on projects and abandon some and come back to some, the better you're informing your own intuition about how to make those kinds of decisions. Which is the same thing you'd say about when to break up with someone, or when to move to a different city, or when to quit a job. Like, there's no way to know. You could stay in the job, and next month, the boss you hated quits. Could happen. You don't know. It could be that you quit, and then it turns, there's no way to predict the future. And that kind of question about how long you persist for, there's no easy answer for that. I'd say experience, though. Abandon the project. Odds are you can come back to the project whenever you like, especially if it's a personal project or you're a writer and you're not committed to a contract or something. You can come back whenever you want. So quit and see what happens. Whatever, I would tweet back to her or text back to her, quit now. That's what he said.
They're watching that.
Yeah, in the back.
So why do you think creativity, as you were saying to the business case, do not mention creativity when you're bringing it up, introducing creativity in a business context? Why do you think it's an anathema to business or a four-letter word?
This is a good question. The question was, why do I recommend not using the word creativity? It's just the way you make change happen is based on culture. So if the verb that gets the most power or gets the most attention is creativity, then definitely use it. But in most environments, the business doesn't pay people in creativity. They don't collect creativity from their customers. It's usually about profit. That's why the people started the company. That's why the people get paid and get bonuses, because they're generating revenue for the company. The primary index of most corporations is going to be capital. That's just what a corporation is. Every culture is different, so there's different flavors of it. There's different things that are emphasized depending on who's leading it. But all that I meant was, if you're going to be an advocate for change, be like a Navy SEAL. But when you land, look at the landscape. Where are the assets? Where are the resources? Who are my allies? You want to pay attention to that before you go charging in. If you really think the best charge you have, because you've seen other people in your company do it, is the creativity charge, absolutely use that. But that's not usually the case. Usually people come in with the creativity charge or the design charge, and there's tons and tons of them, because that's what they personally think is the most important thing, and they're passionate about it, and they don't understand why the rest of the company isn't as passionate about that thing. And so they come in without much power and make it an adversarial thing very quickly. And if you don't have the advantage power-wise, you don't want an adversarial situation.
Just as a follow-up question to that, do you think
I'll charge you twice then.
what's that?
No.
Sorry. Do you think it's a right brain, left brain thing? I mean, if business is
No, I don't. I think everyone has both halves of the brain. The right brain, left brain thing I think is very stupid. Not that you're stupid, but I think it's a very misguided understanding of why people make decisions and how our brains work. You need both parts. If you have just right brain or left brain, you don't function. Everyone uses both parts of their brain. Yes.
Speaking of which, have you ever tried using video of yourself for your journal versus just writing in order to get your face?
Drunk videos of Sky.
If you're creating ideas, eventually something's going to have to interact with someone else's face.
Right.
If you can't see your own as you're developing an idea, when you're writing something down, that doesn't get communicated, but maybe by capturing on video, it does.
Okay. So the question was, have I ever used video to capture ideas? And I made a funny face, which makes her point in a way, because her point was there's more expression that goes on other than just the words. I've never done that. I have tried doing the transcribing thing. It just doesn't work for me, although I do a lot of public speaking. So this is a form that I like and I'm comfortable with, but it's a very different form. This is performance. This is the output of work and practice and study. When I'm writing in my journal, it's just random, half-baked. I heard Dave say some cool thing. I'm writing it down. I'll look at it later. I'm not. As soon as I'm speaking, it's just. I don't know why. I've tried it. It didn't work for me. But if I felt like I wasn't creating enough stuff in my journals, I needed a better way I would try something different. I don't have that problem. I write lots of crappy stuff down all the time. But if I did have that problem, I'd try something else. So I made that face because I'd never heard of that before. I think if I was an actor, maybe I would do that because my form is more visual. I don't know. I have to think about that more. It's a good question.
The idea came to me from a movie. I think it was in the 70s, Brainstorm.
Oh, I know the movie.
And he left her that message that ended up getting his wife, Natalie Wood.
Yeah, Natalie Wood. Yeah. Christopher Walken.
Right. Yeah.
You guys know the movie? All right. Cool.
He left her a video that actually captures his emotion as well, but it's the video that drags her back to the story. It's
Okay.
the interface. So I was just
That's a cool idea. Mr. Zug, did you have a question?
It seems to me you're weird in this respect. One, that
It's a good start.
you have margin in your life to do this stuff, right? To live a creative life. You've got margins. And many of us in this room aspire to do these things, but we're struggling to have these margins. We're on deadlines. I'm trying to get my billables up. I'm shipping shit. I fall asleep on the bus way home. Like these small people climb on me when I walk in the house. Right?
They're small people you know, though, right?
Yeah, they are. Adorable in some way. What are your margin hacks in your life? How do you make space to wander around and fail and like all this stuff?
All right, it's the last question. Got to go. Well, I guess the simple answer is I quit my job to try to do this for a living. So I didn't know this would work. It's what I do for a living. I write books. I speak. For the last 2 years, it's been different. I manage a team for WordPress.com. So I've gone back into the fold. But for the 8 years before that, this is what I did. I wrote books. I gave lectures. I did a little bit of consulting here and there. But the short answer is I quit. I decided that I didn't want to work for anybody else. I wanted to try seeing if I could write books for a living. I didn't know it could work. I really had no faith it would. But I've been thinking about it all the time. It was a dream. I got sick of someday. I got sick of that. I'm like, fuck it. It's going to be this day. And I might hate it, but then I'll come back to the job and career that I had, and I'll appreciate it. Because at the moment, all I'm thinking about is why I'm not doing X. I don't want to live a life where I'm spending all of my energy thinking about what I'm not doing. So the short answer is I quit. The other answers, though, which are not specific to me, there's a huge history of famous creative people that we know who did their stuff on the side. I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that's a good, healthy lifestyle. Again, health and creative, I'm not sure they go together. But there are famous authors who wrote in prison. There are famous authors who wrote in exile.
Great way to get time.
There's commit a felony. That's the plan. Right. I'll visit you. Hey, I'll bring you care packages. But what you're saying is totally true. There's nothing you do. Time is limited, finite time. Everything you use your time for is a trade-off, fundamentally, for everyone. So if you have a family you care about, you like the security of your job, you like to go home and then hang out with your friends, the time for making a real project, a book, a movie, a play, a thing, has to come from somewhere. It has to. If you want to be good at that thing, that means practice. Practice takes time. Think of all the friends you have who are in bands. It's a similar thing. They find a way to fit that in. That's their Saturday afternoon. They don't watch TV. Like a TV is a huge, like you want to go back in the history, like the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and why some people were so productive. There was no 4 hours maintenance time of entertainment per day. We have this default assumption that you're guaranteed by law, the universe, 4 hours of entertainment per day. That's not a law. You have probably, on average, I don't know any of you, but on average, 4 hours a day sitting and watching something. Take an hour out of that every day. Hour a day over a year, that's a book. Hour a day over 3 years, that might be a movie. That's hour a day. I think anyone can find an hour a day. If you're really a dreamer and you're so passionate about it, that hour is a trade for some other pleasurable thing you do by choice. Not an easy decision. I'm not saying, you should. Not easy to do, but the choice is available to you because you're alive. You have a career, probably. I'm assuming you're going to go somewhere. You hope to have a career. So you have choices. These choices are available to you. Throughout the history of the world, these choices did not exist for most people. On this planet today, those choices don't exist for most people. You have those choices available to you. And when you create something, this is the crazy thing for me. I feel like I'm an old, cranky man when I say this. But you make a 2-minute video, you put it online, the whole planet can see it. You know how insane that is to a film director of like 1955? Any of the great legends in any field, a writer, a painter, a musician, even 50 years ago, how hard it was for them to get their work out there to be seen by anybody. And you can do it right now on your iPhone, make a video with your friend in the hallway, and if it's funny enough, 1,000 people, 5,000 people can watch it tonight. Like, that's just mind-blowing to me. That opportunity is just sitting there. It's not about the ideas anymore. That gap between your idea and it actually having an effect in the way that you want is smaller than ever in history. And it's worth thinking about that when you're coming up with excuses for why, it's too hard. Easier than ever. Easier than ever. So go make something. And make it bad. That's fine. Put it on YouTube. No one will see it then. Okay. It's fine. But you made it. And now you learn something. You learn what maybe the next thing you want to do is the next thing you want to do. Or you might decide that this fantasy you have is just a dream. You don't actually like the reality of being a productive, creative person in these more artistic ways. You don't actually like the lifestyle. A lot of the people we know who are famous didn't like the lifestyle either. A lot of miserable, famous, creative people. Lots of them. So, anyway, sorry. That was a fantastic question. I hope my answer wasn't too much of a rant.
One more question.
One more question. Yes, sir.
So you're working with a group of people, and you have that guy that whenever you come up with new ideas, anyone, you kill them by saying, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. Oh, I don't
Wait, I'm sorry. Back up again. You're working with a group of people.
And you have a guy on the team
Okay.
or in the group that whoever comes up with new ideas, it just dismisses them. And
Okay.
doesn't like them. It doesn't move them forward. How would you, I would say deal with him. Let's say we established that you cannot get rid of him, but how would you make him, think?
Well, okay. So there's two different. So the question was, what do you do? You're working on a project team. There's one person who's always the stinker who kills every idea instantly. What do you do about that? And there's two kinds of answers. The subversive answer. Well, I'll do the nicer answer first. The nicer answer first is you pull him aside and have a conversation with him. Hey, we're trying to brainstorm here. Some ideas might take more than 3 seconds of evaluation to know whether it's good or bad. Some ideas might. So if you decide within 3 seconds, you are killing good ideas along with the bad ones. So next meeting, can you try to give a little more space to people? Just have a conversation. This guy might be more powerful than you, might be a senior manager. You can have a conversation with anyone you like. And you offer as a suggestion. That's the upfront, direct way. Someone should have a conversation with him about or her about that behavior. And if you're not the right person to do it, maybe your boss is. Talk to your boss. Go, hey, boss, we have this meeting with this guy. He works for you as well. I'm giving you feedback. He's hard to be creative with. What should I do? Can you talk to him? Should I talk to him? Involve the people who are trying to make you successful and helping you solve the problem. That's the nice, friendly, upfront, politically correct way. The subversive way is find a way to have the meeting without him. Don't call it a meeting. This is, again, like the banner thing. Don't call it a meeting. Just somehow you and 2 or 3 other people end up at coffee every morning in some other place. Somehow it just happened. I don't know. I'm there, you're here. Hey, maybe we should talk about that idea thing. Okay, let's do that. Great. And then you show up to the meeting, and the 3 of you already agree on one of the ideas. Now the power dynamic is very different. What that conversation is like is very different. Worth a try. Anyway, if you have other questions for me, my stuff's up there. I love questions. That's how I learn. I realize stuff I got wrong. Send me mail, ask me a question. I'm happy to answer that way. And thank you for coming. Thank you.